politics. Rosie Lewis joins me from The Australian. Of course, Rosie, for any party that loses an election, a calamity really for Labor at the recent election, it's going to be ugly. I've got some information in relation to the way this review was put together, and it was, after the first version, watered down to not be as personally critical of Bill Shorten. You've got his people in The Australian today saying, don't make him a scapegoat. Well, I can tell them this morning, according to 3 senior Labor sources that I've spoken to this morning, this Labor review was watered down from the first version in order to not be as brutal on him.
So the question then becomes, obviously today we're going to get the final review, the final report, and I think you're right. Obviously Bill Shorten's leadership has to form a part of that review. He was the leader of the party. All these policies were built under him, even if he wasn't the architect of all of them. It was his party, and it was his party for some years, and everyone united under Bill Shorten. I don't think many, if any, have seen that draft review, certainly not in Bill Shorten's camp. So there may be concern there. Will the draft review leak out? If it hasn't to date, you're going to think probably not. I mean, they've been very careful with this review. Certainly no one has seen the review before we get it around lunchtime today, so let's wait and see. I think Bill Shorten's people will probably be happy with the final result. It's
also, on the campaign itself, quite stark in terms of how scathing it is in the fact that there was nothing written down, that it was largely ad hoc, and there was no campaign strategy on how to take on Morrison. It's hard to believe that it could be botched so badly. It's either complacency, hubris, I don't know how they ended up in this position. In hindsight, though, it's quite, and obviously this is about hindsight and moving forward. It's easy to say that, but let's think back to that election campaign, and many people believed, inside and outside Labor, that the momentum was with that party, that there was a mood for change, and that Bill Shorten was the man who would become our Prime Minister. So yes, I think it's going to be a stark look at what went wrong, and a timely look at what went wrong for the Labor Party. But I think we know clearly which way the party is going, and that is to win back its base, blue-collar workers. We know the party has lost hundreds of thousands of voters. I think one of my colleagues, David Tanner, he's actually done the analysis and shown, once you account for population growth, they've actually lost 1.4 million voters since the 2007 election, and that's largely in regional electorates. That's largely blue-collar workers, and you've seen very senior Labor MPs from the left and right concede that's where they need to go now. That's where they need to regain the vote, and that will largely be done through, not so controversial tax and spend policies and a different focus on climate, where it's all about jobs. Well, the review does, I'm told, go very, looks very in a thorough way at the climate policies, and is largely sympathetic to the policies as taken to the election. But you contrast the situation with this review, and as it says, hammers the Labor Party campaign on digital. Its advertising was shocking, versus what was a clinical campaign led by Andrew Hirst and the Liberal Party HQ on digital. Its advertising was so consistent, and, well, as we saw in the end, that mood for change, which many in Labor thought was there, was demolished. And I think it also showed us that messaging counts, and simple messaging is really what's going to win the race at the end of the day. Rosie, great to see you. We'll talk to you in a week.